everyone again. Thank you for joining. I'd like to share with you today my experience working on a project from beginning to now at Microsoft. So it was really like a startup experience being inside a big tech company. So that was really interesting, and it had a lot of learnings that I can share with you. So I was one of the founding members of the shopping product that I'll explain the details that already saved more than $2 billion in savings. So let's get into it. A little bit about myself first. I am from Brazil, and today I work in Seattle, Washington. I have a master's in computer science, more specifically like computer graphics. And exactly today, I'm completing 3 years as software engineer at Microsoft. I am like a full stack engineer, but I specialize a lot in the UX since I started this project. My goal for this talk is to give you a set of action steps and some learnings that you can use to solidify your startup project. So a little bit more about the product. It's a shopping assistant default on the Edge browser. So if you have Edge browser, you probably saw this before. You don't have to install anything. And it finds deals and makes sure you have the best price when you shop online. So it goes from coupons to cashback to compare with other retailers and so on. So let me just show you a quick commercial on what the product is, just to give a bit more context.
Meet the Turner twins. They chill. They compete. They cruise. They do everything together. Except...
Wait, this isn't mine. You don't use Edge to shop?
Microsoft Edge is the best browser for shopping.
Download it yourself.
Cool. So our journey so far really started as an idea. So we had the idea. I know maybe you're familiar with Honey. Is an extension that you have to install, and it has the coupons that it auto applies for you. That's kind of where we started. And our goal was to be default on the Edge browser, because that way we could get like 1 million users like overnight. But first we had to prove the idea and prove it would work. So we started with simple like browser extension and made sure that the technical we could do the technical part of it, which is like get the coupons and auto apply coupons. That was like the first main feature that we have. And eventually we're default on Edge. And with that, like a lot of other things and changes came up. So I will go into details. And as you can see on these two like images, our visual identity also changed a lot. On the left, we're just like, we could like try whatever we wanted to try, like experiment with different designs and animations. And on the right side, we had to follow more of the Edge identity and the Edge visual like identity. So people wouldn't think we are a third-party extension, but also like part of the browser. And so we began that in 2020. We had 4 people in the team, including my manager. We created that browser extension, and we had just coupons and price comparison. Fast forward for today, we have more than 10 devs. We are default on the Edge browser. We have more than 20 features. So I will show a bit like of the challenges of that growth and also what we learned. Here's a list of action steps, and let's go into details. The first one is A/B experiments. If you're not familiar with A/B experiments, it's basically a control experiment where part of like some of your changes that you want to do goes to a group of users, and the rest of users continue getting the same experience as before. And that is good, because then you can compare both groups and see if your change, like improved or maybe make the product worse or even like flat. And that is really good, especially when I was starting a product that one of the first setups that we had in our project, because when you're new and creating a project from scratch, there are a lot of ideas, a lot of hypotheses. People wanted to try new things, and A/B experiment was a good way for us to safely try new ideas without necessarily like being afraid of causing like a big DSAT on our product. Also, it was good to support hypotheses. So if you have something that we want to try and want to do, so for example, even when we became default on Edge, we have to prove through like with data that, you know, like our feature was beneficial and not like making the browser worse. That can also justify business decisions and so on. Everything we do today is behind an A/B experiment, so we can back up afterwards. I think now we have more than 60 experiments, and they run like in parallel, and like we have a lot. So, but they don't tell the full story. So it's also important to do the user research and really talk to users, because A/B experiments are like just numbers. And with user research, you can get really into like the details of what you can do better. And it can be like a long user research where you have multiple participants and like long hours of interviews, or you can have like short ones, but that happen more frequently. So you might be familiar with continuous discovery. So that can also be an option. We did like both approaches. So this first one was like a shorter user research, but we found out some interesting things. For example, we used to have those images on the left in our UI after we like were default on Edge, and we found out that users didn't like those images. So that was really interesting. That is something that an A/B experiment would hardly tell us, but by talking to users, we were able to identify this issue and remove those images to save a bit more space, and also make the kind of reset the UX to be really like part of the browser. But we didn't want it to end just that. We thought the UX is a bit flat. So we did a bigger user research, and so that was like multiple interviews, long hours to get like to uplift our designs a little bit. And with that, we added a lot more colors and like some modern elements like emojis and this kind of things. And it still like try to make the feature appear like trustworthy, because that's one of our main goals. And for this user research, I actually participated like as a listener. I'm a developer, but I'm not qualified to do the user research, but it was really helpful for me to be there and participate, because that could help me understand the path that the designers were taking. And I don't think that happened very often where a developer participates on that process. But yeah, I'll talk a little bit more like on the learnings, because that really helps the teams to work together and, you know, unify, so everyone is following like the same direction. Another little thing that we add is like this feedback thing. So people could also add feedback in our UI directly, so we can always like get that and act upon it. And then afterwards, like this was August 2021, we did this full refresh of the UX, but then we had to step back a little bit, in my opinion, in terms of designs, because of a business decision. So you always have to be prepared for this kind of situations as well. And at the same time, don't stop to experiment and prove, you know, like your hypothesis through A/B experiment. Because so basically, Edge had this new feature where they added this bar, like vertical bar on the right side, with a lot of features that you can have like right there on the browser. And one of them is our feature, like Microsoft Shopping. So because we couldn't like just do whatever we wanted in terms of designs, because now all the features needed to talk among themselves. So that's why we have to go back to a more like follow the colors of the browser and be a bit more serious, let's say, in terms of our designs. So the next action steps are like add logs to your features. So that will help you get the quantitative, I have a very hard time with this word, status of your feature. And you can log many things. Some like straightforward things are daily active users, like how how many users are using your feature every day. Also, this is really important, like errors, like make sure you have a system that you can see those errors in real time, so you can act upon them really fast. Also, user behavior, like have logs for user behavior, like are using clicking on that feature, are using interacting with your feature. Especially like if you're growing your product from zero, is not established yet, you have to be prepared to move and adapt. So it's not because a feature had a showed an improvement to your product before that feature continues to do so. So always keep an eye on it, because you might have to kill a feature, and that's fine. But it's important to be always updated. And also something that is really important to measure that is not given a lot of care, especially at the beginning, is performance, because performance can really impact your product. If your product seems to be slow, people might just leave it and not come back. And performance is important to measure on machines that are not as fast as your machine. I particularly usually get the 75th percentile of all the measures. So I have an idea of how long, my product is taking to load on a slower machine. And the products we use to get all of these logs and make sense of our data and make sense of how users are interacting with our system. One is Azure Data Explorer with Custod Database, Power BI, and then Clarity. So the first one, I think, is well known. It's Azure is an analytics platform for big data, and where you can see data in real time. That's how we get the errors fast, and we can fix it right away. And then all your data we get in Azure, we create dashboards and reports in Power BI, so people outside of our team can get metrics in a way that is easier to ingest, and also keep up to date. They don't have to ask us for new data. We can automatically refresh the data in Power BI, and everything can be tracked easily. And the third one is Clarity. This one is really cool because it's a newish feature and it's free. So, and it helps you to understand and learn how users are using your feature, or your website, for example. So basically on the left side, you can see one of our UIs, and you can see the UI is a bit weird because Clarity do some changes in the UI to protect user privacy. But the mouse action, and you can see where the user went on that particular UI. So it's good to understand if users are having any blockings with your feature, how you can help them. And also they have a lot of other features. Another cool one is a heat map. So if you see on the right, you can see the parts where it's really red are the parts that users are clicking the most. So you can see that they are trying to click on the image. They are trying to click on the image and this title here that we're not doing anything. We didn't add a click functionality to that, but people were clicking on it to get more information. So based on this report, we are able to identify this issue that user have and update the UI to do something about it. And that is something that you can really get from logs. So that's why it's really nice to have Clarity. And then next action step is to unite devs, PMs, and designers. I feel usually those areas stay within a realm and just output things to the other realms. And as I was saying about the user research, it's so nice when you can collaborate in a way that everyone understands each other, and it's not just action steps that you keep sending to the other team. We got better when we unified this process more. So because communication is very complex. So if you have just these separated realms, and this is just to illustrate how communication can get very complex. For every people, there are dots, we have communication lines. So you can see that with 14 people, we already have 91 lines of communication. So you have to have a process. There are ways to reduce those communications issues. And I'll just share three that I think it works very well. One is to keep people on the loop, and don't assume, just because someone has a technical role, they might not, they don't have interest in understanding the user or understanding, like design directions. I'm not saying that, like everyone should have an opinion on things or like on design or user research, because everyone has your own like specialized in something, and you have to respect that. But at the same time, like people can understand points of view, and that is the same for the opposite. So I feel like there's always like a conflict point where like designs create these really nice things and they share with developers, and developers are like, we cannot do this. So that is very frustrating, and I think a lot of developers miss to communicate the right technical limitations the engineers have in some areas, and by communicating those limitations, because everything can be done, right? Everything can be done. It just depends like on how many time you have, how many resources you have. So if you have a limitation that is limiting a really cool design, maybe like both designers and engineering team can communicate that with the leadership, and then the leadership might consider prioritizing fixing that limitation. So that actually really helped, because after we communicate the correct limitations, what the designers would usually do is they would share the design with, like, considering you don't have a limitation and an alternative design. So the leadership can be, okay, if you really like this design on the left, you need to allow the engineering team to take the time to fix a limitation. Does that make sense? And then third, use tools to keep everyone on the same page. Figma is already well known, and also we recently added Storybook as well. So Storybook, for those that doesn't know, like you basically create stories of different elements that you have on your product. It can be like as specific as you want, or like you can have a more complex story, and that has been really helpful, especially for designers to evaluate, like design regressions, fit and finish that they want to do, and also to access certain scenarios that are harder to trigger on, like real time. So by having a story there, they can just go to a link real easy and just communicate with the developer on what needs to be changed. Next is tests. We want to prevent, errors from reaching users, right? And then we have many different types of tests. One is unit tests, very well known. We use just for our product, but to be honest, we don't have a lot of unit tests as we should be, because on a startup, everything seems good in theory, right? We have to add tests for every feature, for every function we add. Realistically, we were a lot of fast development have the priority over those kind of safeguards. Instead, we added a more general safeguard at the beginning, which was having a staging phase. Basically, when we do like a change in the code, instead of sending to everyone at once, we have this staging phase where we send the feature, like the product for like the update for a group of users. And then, like after a few hours, we verify logs. And if they are okay, we continue, the pushing out the changes. And another test that is actually pretty cool is visual parity test. So we've been using Task Cafe because it's free and it didn't require any we didn't have to set up anything very complex to start using it. However, it's really simple. And I know like Storybook has a really nice one that is chromatic. We also explored that path, but since Task Cafe was simpler to set up, we went for that. And just a tip here, both Storybook and Task Cafe was like new features that I was trying to, like create the culture in our team to keep adding stories, to keep adding visual parity tasks. So my idea here was to combine those two. So the Task Cafe, the task will run on Storybook stories instead of the actual environment, because one of the reasons, because it's harder since our feature is on like an extension, the browser is not like a link that I can go to. But that also helped because now people, if they want the benefits of locking in what they developed, so there is no regression and visually, they have to add that to Storybook. So one pushes the other, and then like I can keep both updated. And just to demonstrate how it works, like image on the left is like the expected image that the system is expecting, and that is retrieved directly from Figma. So like what the designers like did, like I just use that to create my visual parity task so that I make sure that my UX is polished. And then if there is a change that regresses it, it will show on the image on the middle. You can see that the image was like zoomed in because of a change. And then the third one, it also outputs like the difference in pixels. So it basically compares like pixel by pixel, and things needs to be like matching. But even if you add a lot of tasks and everything, it's possible that your system will fail for some error or something. So it's also important to fail gracefully as much as you can, so you don't compromise your reputation, like especially as a new feature. So a new product, sorry. So, like one way is to really like organize your code, your feature. So it fails like per feature and not the entire thing. So maybe users are seeing just a small part of what your product is because the RAS like had an error or something, but at least they are seeing something. And most of the times they won't know, right? There is something broken. And then of course, I'm sure you're logging all of this and tracking all of this so you can fix right away. Next, we are almost there, is documentation. When you're new, also like same way as tasks, you kind of push back this kind of things to like ship faster. But it's really important to keep a track of the documentation so people that are new can help right away. Your expectation is to grow and grow, and that includes hire more people. So it's good to have like people being able to ramp up really fast. One nice thing that one of our colleagues in our team did was create these learning sessions every other week. So people that were there in the team for longer could talk about, like a specific part of the product, like could be the code architecture, could be how we log things, could be, how to analyze our metrics and all of that. And all of those learning sessions were recorded, so new people could also access the previous ones. So that was really cool. And, like that would require like once you have everyone in a meeting for 30 minutes, 1 hour, and, that really helps people that are joining. So to finalize, let me share like the learnings that we have besides the action steps that I shared. So the first one is that people need to be aligned on priorities and goals, and that should include everyone. Don't assume because people are like from the design team, they don't have interest in knowing, your technical limitations and the other way around. Also, data is your friend. Always lead with data. As I said, it's really easy on a new product. Everyone has ideas. Everyone has something to contribute, but you also want to make sure you are still going to the right direction. And for that, like A/B test can be really your friend there, and lead with data. Third one, create best practices and safeguards that make sense to your team and product. I know like in paper, like thing doesn't always look transferred to the real world. So, do adaptations to your own environment. For example, we had a limitation that we couldn't use React, and React is something like when you talk about UX, you immediately think of React, but we couldn't use it. So we had to adapt, and that's fine. Next, don't try to convince or change a culture. Like I wanted to introduce a storybook and visual parity tasks, but I cannot just say, okay, now you have to do like every feature, you have to, add a task, add storybook, because people just think of that as another to-do list. Instead, like you should show an example, make it easy, and promote the benefits. For example, every time the visual parity task catches something, I'm promoting it. I'm saying, okay, this could go out, but the visual parity task was there. So, in the same way, like if something goes wrong, I'm like, if we had visual parity task for that, that shouldn't happen. And, like that, with that, people will start seeing the benefits and the change happens more organically. Next, your product will never be perfect, so don't be afraid to experiment. We have, as I said, we have a lot of experiments going on in parallel. And lastly, don't forget about the power of shipping. Don't wait for a product to be perfect before you start sending it to the user, because you might get things that you couldn't have on the development phase. Also, someone else might put the product out there first, and even though your product was better when it was released afterwards, you might be like might have lost time here. So yeah, don't underestimate the power of shipping. And lastly, with big growth comes big responsibility. I'd like to thank everyone again, and I'll be here for questions afterwards.